Good evening, everyone. This is Rochelle Wilhite, designated broker for Best Choice Realty. We are on conference call number 10, and we are going to be small in numbers tonight since the Seahawks are playing right now. But I want to make sure we cover conference call number 10 because it is about the contract. Several of you need this information because you are fairly new to the business, or maybe you're getting in after being out for several years, and you'll need a recap. So I have went ahead and recorded this call so that you can refer back to it. Tonight we're going to cover aspects of the contract that we may not have covered before. So if you want to have your MLS open, northwestmls.com, you can access the express forms and then go ahead and refer to the form numbers. If you don't have an MLS your computer open tonight, if you want to just jot down the form numbers or have a pen and paper so that you can write down the form numbers that I'm going to be discussing, and then you can go back after the call and refer back to those form numbers, print them out, maybe refer to some of the things we talked about. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to cover several form numbers. The first one is going to be the Form 36 counteroffer. Now, when you are doing a counteroffer, and I'm seeing quite a bit of negotiation now that we've entered October, there's a few different ways to counteroffer. And so if you're a new agent and you're putting in an offer, you're going to typically have the regular purchase and sale agreement with all the addenda. But you're also going to want to make sure that you understand what happens, or you're going to be able to explain to your client what happens when the seller changes or modifies, or in essence counters the purchase and sale agreement. So there are a few different ways to handle a counteroffer. I'm going to teach you guys the best way first, and then discuss with you the exceptions. So if I was going to get a counteroffer from a seller, sometimes they will just go ahead and use a Form 36, which would be very, very nice to work with an agent who knows how to use a Form 36. So if that is the case, you would just get your entire offer, Form 21, all addenda, all signed off, on all the bottom, and then the first page, every place would be initialed, and then the Form 36 is a counteroffer form. And what that counteroffer form has on it is the price and any terms that need to be switched or changed or modified from the purchase and sale agreement. By using the Form 36, it's a way for you to clearly understand on one piece of paper what the seller is in agreement to and what they are not in agreement to. It makes it a lot cleaner if the seller goes ahead and uses a Form 36. However, I would say over half of the listing agents or the agents representing the seller don't know how to use the Form 36 properly, and what they end up doing is crossing things off in the purchase and sale agreement throughout and requiring you as the buyer's agent to place an initial at all those changes. So again, I'm going to talk with you about the Form 36. The Form 36 would have a price and then the other. There is a place on the Form 36 at the bottom where if you are going to be the one initiating a counteroffer, say the seller came back and agreed to, the terms, wanted you initial off all the places, and perhaps maybe everything was agreeable to you as the buyer's agent, but maybe the price was still not where it needed to be. And so you could even do what we call a counter offer by using the Form 36 and introducing that form if it's not agreeable to your buyer. If, for example, the form, all of the places need to be initialed, but you are not in agreement of all of the places, or maybe you did not agree to the price, then you would use a Form 36, and you would indicate the price that would be acceptable to your buyer. And then at the very bottom of the Form 36, there's a date that if you don't fill it in, the counteroffer would expire 2 days after delivery of the counteroffer or Form 36 notice. So you do want to put in a date unless you want it to expire 2 days from delivery. So make sure I always fill in the next day by noon, or I put the next day by 9 p.m. I like to fill that date in so that everybody's clear on when we need to respond by. And at the bottom, the sellers or the buyers, whoever is accepting the counteroffer, would need to sign off on the Form 36 in order to have mutual acceptance. On the Form 36, there is a lot of confusion when it comes to sellers not knowing how to use this form, because in essence, the seller is feeling like by inserting in a Form 36 or an addendum into the contract that they have went ahead and agreed to everything. And in essence, no, they have not. If you have a seller who is like that, who is wanting to use the Form 36, and they're concerned about, well, if I sign off all of the pages, and then, will I have mutual acceptance? Or maybe that Form 36 gets disjointed from the contract. Maybe I won't have mutual acceptance. What I like to see is under the seller's signature on Form 21 or next to the purchase price, you could put C Form 36, or you could refer to Form 36 for seller's counteroffer. And you could write that either on the addenda or right above the seller's signature or next to the price. I see a lot of top listing agents doing that when they include a Form 36 with their counteroffer. When you do the Form 36 a counteroffer, if the party that makes the counteroffer has a date, the acceptance, if you accept within that timeline, then you have, in essence, mutual acceptance. If, say, the other party says, I got another offer, I want to withdraw the counteroffer, there is a withdrawal form. And so if the parties have not agreed mutually to everything that was changed on the Form 36, in essence, the person making the counteroffer can withdraw the counteroffer. And there's a counteroffer withdrawal form that you might want to be aware of. Every time you submit mutual acceptance, counteroffers, notices, things of that nature that are time sensitive, you really need to make sure that you're sending that notice and that time sensitive information not only to the agent or the broker you're working with, but also to their firm and to support at Best Choice Realty WAF. When you do that, it puts it on alert for me to watch. That way I know if something's not being presented properly, if there are time-sensitive information that I need to help you with, and getting the broker to realize what's going on. And plain and simple, if there's multiple offers or the hint of multiple offers, it's important to know when a form or notice or counteroffer was delivered. So be sure you're doing that as best practice. Moving on to earnest money deposit receipt. You need to make sure, if you're the agent, you're the buyer's agent, that you are doing a good job of making sure the earnest money is indeed deposited. Now, we do not ever have a client write a check out or an earnest money check out for Best Choice Realty. Any monies that are related to the contract need to be made out to the closing agent and need to be held by the closing agent. So in the instance of a purchase and sale agreement that is being accepted, and let's say that the buyer ends up saying, Rochelle, I want to go ahead and get you the earnest money because I'm going to be at work for the next couple of days. Anytime I receive earnest money from, say, for example, my client, it's always best practice to get a receipt. There is a receipt you can just print off the MLS. I don't remember the form number on that because I don't use that receipt. I use a receipt book that I have in my car. If you have a receipt book, that's sufficient, just showing that you have indeed received the earnest money or collected something from somebody, but you need to make sure that it gets deposited within 3 days of receipt of mutual acceptance. And 3 days would not include the weekend, so it does give you a little bit more time to get that money turned in, but you want to make sure that you're getting that earnest money deposited according to the contract. So, and that's your responsibility as the buyer's agent to make sure that that gets deposited. And you prove receipt, meaning that you should contact the title or escrow company that it's being held with and have them send you over an email or provide you with a fax confirmation that they indeed received the earnest money check from your client. That is required as a buyer's agency. There are many title and escrow companies that we use at Best Choice Realty that we have relationships with, and that makes your job a lot simpler if you're not wanting to be responsible or have to provide a receipt or do a receipt book in your car. There is many of the title and escrow companies that we work with, they would be happy to either send your client a FedEx number so that they could just go and overnight their earnest money check, or provide wiring instructions to wire the earnest money, or just quite simply pick up, send a courier to your client's address and have the earnest money picked up that way. And again, all of those things would take a little bit of coordination by your part, but it would save time and money oftentimes for you to get the earnest money deposit correctly. Make sure it's being properly delivered. So if the client says, no, Rochelle, it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and just go to Chicago Title and have it deposited there, it's okay if they do that. They're just going to need to, you're going to need to check that and within, I would say give it 2 days after mutual acceptance, and then contact the title company or escrow company that you're using that's being, that the earnest money is being held with, and just verify that that client indeed took the earnest money to the closing agent and that they have a receipt that they can give you. If at any point in time during those 3 days where the earnest money was supposed to be deposited and it wasn't according to the contract, you need to let me know and you need to let the other party know. So if, for example, my client says, Rochelle, I'm going to deposit it, and something happens, they forget, they got really busy at work, they missed the cutoff, it's on day 4 of our purchase and sale agreement, and I found out that the earnest money did not get deposited, we need to provide the sellers notice, meaning we need to let them know that the earnest money was not deposited according to the contract and get an extension on that so that we're covered. If you have any problems with getting earnest money deposited, you need to let me know immediately. Now let's jump into the form discussion, just a brief overview of the forms that you would need to put a purchase and sale agreement together. The first thing you want to think about is your client going to be paying cash or are they going to be financing? If they're going to be financing the purchase, you're going to want to ask them who they're using for their lender, who they've made application with, and who they have a pre-approval with. If you have that information, you can then go ahead and just make a quick phone call over to that lender. Maybe you know, or maybe they're using a preferred lender, which would be even better. But maybe you need to make a quick phone call to find out if they're going to need to have seller concessions or closing costs paid for, and also just to verify that indeed they are pre-qualified for that purchase amount that you're thinking about offering on. If they know and that they provide a pre-approval letter for you, all the better. You don't usually have to make a phone call, although it's a good best practice to do so. What you'd want to do is then include a 22A. That's always required when you're getting financed. It's a financing contingency that protects your buyer, so you want to write down your sheet of paper, 22A, finance contingency. Couple of things that I see often mistakes on for newer agents is they forget to fill in what type of loan they're doing. They don't check the box. You need to make sure you do that. Is it a conventional loan or is it FHA loan? Is it a VA loan? If you're not sure, that's where you want to call the lender and find out what type of loan they're using. There's also an important point that if, for example, I just wrote one over the weekend for my sister-in-law's family, and they were making an offer on a place, and I knew that they were going to be using an FHA loan, but they also were using a down payment assistance program, a special program that the city of Tacoma utilizes. So when you have a special program or you have knowledge of a specific type of loan product, within the FHA or within maybe it's a USDA loan with a special type of grant program, there is a box that you can check that says Other, and you can indicate that as a disclosure point on Term 1 of the 22A. So make sure that you're properly filling that out. Also on 22A, I often see, deadlines not filled out, and sometimes, I hope you're not one of these agents that will get themselves in trouble, but on the 22A, that's the only place in the entire contract that specifically states who is responsible for closing costs. And if you do not fill out the 22A on the first page, I believe it's Term 4, then what you'll need to make sure you're doing is letting your buyer know that they will be responsible for their own closing costs, because in essence, if nothing is filled out on 22A on closing costs term number, then it's zero. And so this is where you would negotiate closing costs. On the 22A, some of the very tenured agents, I don't know, back in the day in the 1980s and 90s, we would negotiate what we call points, where we'd have to negotiate 1 point or 2 points or 3 points. What that meant was usually percentage points. So if you're used to working with clients maybe from the old days, maybe they bought in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, and now they're buying in the year 2000, they have an option to either check the box for a flat rate of closing costs that the seller would be paying for, or to ask for a percentage. So you need to check the appropriate box and indicate. I get this question quite often for newer agents. Rochelle, should I ask for points, or should I ask for a flat amount? You're going to know based on what comparables you see and whether you're even going to be able to ask for closing costs. Pretty much in King County, anywhere that I'm currently working and watching the marketplaces, I'm not seeing that a lot of closing costs are being asked for. Certainly you can ask for whatever you want to ask for, but in King County, especially in Seattle, most of the closing costs are getting tacked, what we call tacked to the top, or wrapped into the loan. And so what that means is that the price might be escalated or increased to offset the amount of closing costs that we're going to need the sellers to pay for. So make sure you're having that conversation with the lender, making sure that if, like, say, for example, the purchase price was $250 and you have to increase the price to $255 to cover $5,000 of seller-paid closing costs, make sure the lender has approved your client for the $255, because we have run into problems before with the buyer not qualifying for that increased amount in purchase price. Oftentimes buyers have money set aside for the down payment, but maybe they need a little assistance with closing costs. Again, this is a negotiable item. However, it's non-negotiable pretty much when you're talking about a seller's market, which we are often in the King County area. Now in Pierce County, I am seeing closing costs being asked for. And certainly the seller, based on whether they can net what they need to net and get where they need to be, they may or may not agree to all of the closing costs. And a lot of the newer agents ask me, Rochelle, what is typical for closing costs? And they can range anywhere from about 1% to 3%, given the type of loan product or the type of loan kind of grant program that your lender is using. So make sure you're talking with the lender and find out how much. If you can get the exact amount or pretty close to the exact amount, you can go right with the flat amount. If you're not sure but you want to go ahead and negotiate closing costs, on cash sales, it can be up to about 1%. On finance sales, it can be up to about 3%. So again, that's how you would fill in that section. Moving on to 22D. I would require a 22D pretty much anytime you're working with a purchase and sale agreement, because there are additional clauses that protect you as the agent and protect your client in terms of title insurance, the type of title insurance, the square footage, the attached items. There have been many, many times that I've been able to offset potential litigation because of using the 22D. 22D stands for optional clauses, and it's 22D as in dad. Now, you want to use the 22D, and you want to check pretty much the boxes on the first page, and those are included. Anytime you check a box, that means it's part of the contract. If you do not check the box, it is not part of the contract, and so it would not be applicable. But it's kind of a check-the-box kind of option there when it comes to optional clauses. On number 2, on term 2 of 22D, I catch a lot of people, even people who have been in the business a long time, where they end up checking the 22D standard box because they're used to doing it maybe from the olden days where we had to check and we had to specify what type of title insurance we wanted. Clearly, if we do not check the box, number 2 is included in the purchase and sale agreement, and that is the Alta policy, which is the average or the middle of the road, the better policy of all the 3 policies that you can get. Standard, if you check the standard box, that's a downgrade, and Alta is the average or the type of policy that pretty much 90% of people get, the Alta policy, the lender's coverage. And then if you want the extended, that's for 5% of all purchase and sale agreements have a 5% Alta. I'm sorry, not an Alta, an extended Alta. And what that usually means is that there's going to be a survey that's needed. There's going to be a lot more information provided, and it's very expensive for the seller to provide that. If you have a question about, do I need an extended policy, any of your title reps local here in our area would be able to explain the benefits or the downsides. There is a sheet on it that explains what you get with the Alta, what you get with the extended, and what you get with the standard. And you might want to get yourself a sheet that explains the difference between the three different policies. Plain and simple, though, if I'm looking at a purchase and sale agreement and I just want to make sure that you guys are covered, best to just go ahead and leave number 2 not checked. Go ahead and include, and that would be included, all-inclusive of the Alta policy. Okay, on 22D, also if you are representing a family member or you are having, you're related to somebody or you're purchasing as like your own property, you do need to disclose that somewhere in the purchase and sale agreement, and that would be on the 22D in the other section. That's where I would want to see that type of language. Plain and simple, like when I was representing my, somebody that's a relationship to me. Seller is related to selling office, or buyer is related to selling office, so that they know that there's a relationship there. It's very important you disclose that. It is an RCW code that must be disclosed to the parties if you have some sort of relationship. It can be as simple as a husband and wife. It really is a blood relation that needs to be disclosed. So for the brother-in-law situation, technically I don't have to, but I always like to cover myself, so I made sure I disclosed that. Okay, next addendum I'm going to cover tonight is the Form 35. Always include Form 35. It is the inspection addendum. Even if you're waiving the inspection, you need to make sure you're including the Form 35. If you're doing a vacant land or you're doing vacant property, there is in essence not a 35 that you'll be using, but you'll be using a 22, can't remember the number of the letter, but there's a special form you use for feasibility. It might be a 22F. So make sure you're getting the proper inspection or feasibility contingency. The Form 35 is an inspection contingency for a structure or a condo or for a multifamily, and Form 35 basically covers you for that entire period of time. If you left it blank, it would be up to 10 days so that you can do your due diligence, meaning you can work with your buyer to have a home inspector go out there, that you can have pretty much anything checked out, and if something does not check out, like you find out information that is not suitable to the buyer, you can back out using a 35R. And the 35R would clearly state that the earnest money would be refunded to the buyer. That is really a good opportunity, and that's why we want to include the Form 35, because if the buyer chooses not to do an inspection, on page 2 of the Form 35, it in essence says to the buyer, we have advised them as their broker, as their agent, to get a home inspection, but they have chosen to waive. And that's not something you want to disclose or you want to suggest to them in an email or any kind of email correspondence or even phone messages or text messages that they should waive the inspection. What should be done is that you include the Form 35 in your discussions or when placing your offer, and they are to explain to you how they want to go about their inspection, whether they want to waive or whether they want to accept. And again, that should be done when you put the offer in. So always include a Form 35 if you're representing a buyer. Also, be sure that you check out 41D. If you're recommending a home inspector or you have a list of people you want them to use, you should be getting their initial on the 41D. That is a required RCW code that you use that document. Also be sure if you're representing a buyer in the city of Tacoma, there's a Tacoma County jurisdiction requirement that requires that you disclose that they possibly have a side sewer and that you should get a sewer scope. Now that we have that in the purchase and sale agreement, we have plenty of sewer scope people that are on staff or that are on call to help you in getting sewer scopes done. It's in addition to a regular inspection. If you have a home that's an older home, especially homes that are near lots of bushes, we're in Washington, there's a lot of trees and overgrown shrubbery that could be impeding the sewer line. And that would be important to know before your clients go to close. I'll give you an example. My brother bought a home in Tacoma. I gave him the proper disclosure. I told him he should get a sewer scope. We included the Form 35 that clearly said that he had the option to conduct his own sewer scope inspection. He chose not to do a sewer scope. He ended up renting the property out to a tenant. The tenant was in there for about a year and a half, and all of a sudden they had some difficulty and some problems with their plumbing. We sent the Tacoma sewer scope guy that I recommend out there, and the Tacoma sewer scope guy that went out there identified that there was a blockage. The blockage ended up being in the middle of the road between the house and where the sewer line went into the city connection, and that needed to be, the sidewalk needed to be removed, jackhammer the sidewalk, and even part of the city street. That cost my brother $22,000. So a very, very expensive repair item, and it would have only cost him, if he would have listened to me, around $240 for that type of sewer line inspection. They take a video and they actually go into the sewer line and they check to see and make sure that the sewer line is clear, and they provide that. That is something that would be at the buyer's cost, addition to a normal standard building inspection. So again, that would be something you want to disclose if you're in the city of Tacoma for sure, but it's already written into the 35, the Form 35. You just need to take action if you have an older home or a home that you feel maybe doesn't have a clean sewer scope. Maybe want to have that done during the inspection as well. The next form I'm going to go through is the 22J. If you're using a 22J, again, it's an older home perhaps. Most of the good listing agents are going ahead and incorporating that into the supplementary documents and having the seller disclose whether they have reports regarding lead-based paint. 22J is in essence the lead-based paint. And there's some common mistakes that are done on the 22J that I want to bring up on the call tonight. Before I let you go and let you know about 22J, common mistakes that people make. Number one, they end up waiving something before they have knowledge of something. Don't get yourself in that type of situation. Make sure that you include the 22J. If the seller has not provided, maybe been forthcoming with that information when you're putting your offer in, go ahead and include the 22J as an additional addendum. Include that as one of the addenda on page 1 of the purchase and sale agreement. But when you actually fill it out, don't have the buyer acknowledge, waive, or accept. Have them initial the bottom of both of those pages, and then wait for the seller to declare or to disclose on page 1 of the 22J whether they have knowledge of the lead-based paint. And once they have done that and signed the disclosure on the 22J, then the buyer can then check the waive or conduct the risk assessment and sign, and you would sign that as well. It is proper to do it that way. If it's not done properly and there is a potential lawsuit that's in play, it's a very, very big fine. And I'd hate to have you guys mess up on that just because you were rushing to get something in. There's no rush needed. Just include the 22J, initial that you want to have it be part of the purchase and sale agreement, but the declaration can come after. And then that would be mutual acceptance once that's done properly. And then the last form is the 22K. That's pretty standard. 22K, I see this a lot of times not done right. 22K needs to be filled out with names and phone numbers or names and information. If it's not, you should require or you request politely that the listing agent or the seller fill out the 22K for you so that you can contact the utility companies and have your buyers know what utility companies they're using. What I see a lot of times is, as a buyer's agent, we send that over and we have that be part of the purchase and sale agreement, but then we never get that filled out by the listing agent or by the seller. It can be filled out by the listing agent as well as seller. So make sure you're getting that included as part of the purchase and sale agreement. 22T is often used as well, and that's the title contingency. If you have a 22T, in essence, it's going right simultaneously with your Form 35. So if you're paying cash and you're wanting a small contingency to protect your interest or your cash, you can go ahead and throw on a 22T. There's a lot of ways to back out using a 22T. If you're including it as a best practice with the Form 35, in essence, you have 5 days from mutual acceptance or 5 days from receipt, depending on how you check the box on 22T, to back out if there's something that's written onto like an easement, or maybe there's a box or there's a power line that runs to the property that the buyer is not happy about, that they find out when they get the title report. They can back out using the 22T or the title contingency. Okay. If it's something that's related around the structure and you're using a Form 35 and they're doing an inspection, they can back out using the Form 35. It just makes it an easier way. So if you want to go ahead and include 22T from here on out, I think it's smart. I think it's a best practice. But if you're up against multiple offers and you're trying to win the offer, be sure you understand that that's no different than a Form 35 where you have 5 days to back out. So that would be a contingency. So 22T is a title contingency. If you are using cash and you don't have proof of funds and you don't want to have a financing contingency, but you want to disclose to the seller that you're good for the money, go ahead and use a 22EF. And 22EF is a form that says within a certain period of time you will provide proof of funds to the seller. The seller can then come back and ask you to provide where the proof of funds is coming from. And then you can also, on the third section, the third term of that form, provide that documentation that the funds are in escrow within a certain period of time prior to closing. It's a good form that you should start to use, the 22EF, if you are working with a lot of cash buyers. 22RA, you can write that one down. If your buyer is in a higher price point, or if they're just really nervous, or maybe it's an off-market deal where it's not on the MLS, it's a for sale by owner, and you want to just have some closure or have some knowledge that this buyers and the sellers have talked with their attorney. 22RA is a way that you can have a 5-day review on attorney review, and that's something that you can perhaps introduce if you need to when you're dealing with a new construction buyer and you just want to have an addenda where they'll have their attorney look over the language. You should not be educating your buyers on new construction addenda. They're boilerplate language that's been designed and crafted by the builder's attorney. And there's language that overrides and supersedes all of the language that our normal purchase and sale agreement provides for. So if you need to, you should suggest and you should advise that they include a 22RA if they're dealing with new construction, or for sale by owners, I use a 22RA a lot. But you should advise them that they should seek their attorney to look over that contract. Same thing goes for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I've seen some addenda. They're pretty lengthy, 20, 30-page long document that overrides everything that our normal purchase and sale agreement goes for. If you went to the seller and said, hey, we want to use our own forms, they would say no, absolutely not. But if your client is willing to get their hands on a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mae contract, the boilerplate contract, we can provide that to them, and then maybe before they end up writing their offering, they can have their attorney look that contract over and advise them on whether this would be a good deal for them. We should not be advising them on clauses from the Fannie or Freddie or even from the new construction, because we are not trained in understanding those contracts. However, you should always read them so that you know the contingencies and how much, and if they have a way to back out, you should familiarize yourself with that type of language, and obviously how much earnest money and things of that nature. But if you're asked to advise the client on that purchase and sale agreement, you can just refer them to talk with their attorney. A 41C is a new form, and I was kind of alluded to it. It's a for sale by owner form. And you can, if it's not on the market and you're representing a party and you're trying to get paid, you would want to use a 41C. That's how you get paid as a buyer's agent with it not being on the market. And hopefully you don't have to do this. This is what I'll end with. There's a Form 50 and a Form 51. And the Form 50 is a way to get your earnest money back. It's a way to instruct escrow on who will get the earnest money back. Form 51 is what is like a cancellation. It would cancel the entire purchase and sale agreement and all the rights associated with the contract. So before you use a Form 50 or a Form 51, please give me an opportunity to assist you. The sooner I know about a challenge or a problem with an issue with the contract, or a buyer or seller not wanting to buy or to sell, or unhappy about a certain aspect of the transaction, give me an opportunity sooner rather than later to assist you, so we don't have to ever use a Form 50 or Form 51. Those forms are used to cancel and deal with earnest money release, and that should be something that I work with you on when you're dealing with things like that. So hopefully this was helpful for you, and you've written down a few of the numbers that you should just go and print and familiarize yourself with. And if you have questions or a specific contract that you don't know what forms I'm going to need, you're welcome to simply text me, and I will be happy to rehearse what forms you need or what addenda you need. If you want to just text me and say, hey, Rochelle, I'm writing up an offer on MLS number such and such, I'd be happy for the first couple of contracts for you to just get a text or a simple email from me with what addenda you should include. And that way you'll get familiar with the contract and the addenda that's associated with the different properties that you're going to be working with. I didn't cover short sales because there's not as many out there right now, and I did not cover Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and foreclosures. I'm tempted to go through that on next week's call just so that I can show you guys how to fill out those types of contracts. So if you want to stay tuned for next week's call, that's probably what I'm going to insert into our conference calls. Have a great week, you guys, and as always, I'm here if you need me. Talk to you soon.